at the U.S. Customs. He was in the office at the time, and they just handcuffed him and took him away because a bunch of people identified his voice. And he initially admitted to had been calling Sue for 3 years prior, which I gather is about
the
how long.
last 3 years of the calls.
Yeah, which is what I believe is how long that cell phone had been active and had been issued to him.
So he didn't admit to the phone booth calls now?
No, so, and that makes sense to me, right? He said, well, I've had this cell phone for 3 years, so they know for sure. If I was doing it now, I was doing it 3 years ago. All right, he knows how it works. So he says, yeah, 3 years ago. Then during questioning, he admitted to the additional 17 years. So it was 20 years altogether.
What makes me curious about this guy is, did he do this to anybody else, or was it exclusively Sue Billig?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
And he will probably not tell.
No.
For good reason.
Yeah, so when he lawyered up, because you lawyer up, his lawyers actually said they were entering a plea of not guilty to the 2 counts of felony stalking.
Well, if I was lawyers, I would use the big phone defense. Yeah, big phone.
His lawyers decided to do something even easier,
even more shameless,
even more awful, and claim that the calls between Hank and Sue were consensual.
You're going to have to explain that in this theory, because that took me a long time to wrap my head around, and I had to do a lot of reading on it.
Well, I think probably the theory is, I'm put on my shameless hat here, probably. He called and she stayed on the phone and didn't just hang it right up, and so
he took answered the phone, so it's consensual.
Well, she answered the phone. That's not consensual, but she stayed on the phone. Is probably what the lawyer said. Well, if she didn't like the phone calls, why didn't she just hang it up? Instead, she just stayed on the phone and listened to his stuff. That's probably what the. I'm not saying. I
know you're not agreeing with it. You're probably right, and that probably is what they said.
Or she might have even said, if she really believed that there was the tiniest shred of hope that this guy actually had her and maybe someday would give her back, she might have said something on the order of, please call me again. Because that was the only hope that she had.
Yeah. Yeah, I think. Their argument, was basically that, yes, Hank was making these kind of stalking and, really kind of sexual, bordering on sexual assault calls. What he was saying to her was so really awful and explicit, but it was almost always of, a pretty explicit sexual nature. And I suspect that, that was part of the prosecution was saying, look at all the really messed up things he said. And the defense was like, no, that was part of the game for her. She enjoyed it. She got off on it.
She enjoyed it. Or else she wouldn't have kept answering.
Right.
She knew better.
Right. Even though the entire time, the character of Hal in Hank continued to say, I have her, I have your daughter. And that was the only hope. I'm sorry, I shouldn't go too far into this because it's just it's so disgusting.
He's a real Jekyll and Hyde, though. If you think about it, during the day, he's the mild-mannered, law-abiding, law-enforcing good guy. Yeah. And then at night, he's the evil, evil creep.
Well, so he actually, he said in his admittance to guilt to the police, he said, it would just build in him.
Some sort of obsessive compulsive.
He would just he would get the urge to call her, and he could suppress it for a certain amount of time, and it would just build and build and build, and then he would call her a couple times a night, and by the end of the call session, he would just be relieved. So it was a compulsion of some kind. Yeah. It sounds like still kind of messed up.
Yeah, it's creepy compulsion.
Yeah.
This is something that, thankfully, really, I can't get away with. I can't do this. I could just picture I'm making my pervy call, and then he does this pause. He says, wait a minute, I know your voice. You're that podcast guy.
And you go, oh, no.
I don't know what you're talking. I don't even know what a podcast is.
What's a podcast?
So I can't do that.
No, you can't.
I don't have cats either.
Yeah. And so on the face of this, right, we can pretty much say, well, he's a creep and but he wasn't able to provide any information about Amy that he couldn't have read in the papers, which is true. And also, the information that he said he provided about her was inaccurate, so he probably didn't kidnap her. So one of the things that I will just say here is that, one of the things that Sue did, of course, was say, okay, prove it to me. Tell me something that that only you could know about Amy's body. Tell me something about her that only you could know.
Yeah.
And this is important because Amy had a pretty gnarly appendectomy scar on her torso. That information was never released. Well, I mean, it is now, but, after 20-some years, had still never been released to the public.
And he never reported the appendectomy scar.
And he did not. He actually said her torso's smooth.
Well, he didn't smoothed her out, right?
Right, he smoothed her out.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I don't know, whatever that meant. I don't know.
But no, I mean, so
obviously
even
he
then,
didn't know anything.
Right. But on the other hand, it's worth noting that there is a single mention of a Hank in Amy's diary from about 6 weeks before she disappeared. And it said, quote, "Hank says as soon as I finish school, he wants to take me to South America with him. I told him he's crazy," unquote. Sue and pretty much everybody who was friends with Amy at the time doesn't recall there ever being a Hank, ever. And granted, this is a one-off, one time somebody mentions it.
If you're a 17-year-old girl, you're not going to tell your parents you're dating a guy who's 10 years older than you. Probably.
Well, but it's also that I mean, we've read about this in different stories before, where when there's somebody that you don't necessarily want to admit that you're seeing or interested in, you give them a code name or a nickname. So Hank is somebody else entirely. Plus, Hank isn't an uncommon name. So
No.
she could have literally known some kid in school who was named Hank saying, "I'm going to go to South America and you should come with me, hot girl." It would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, pretty much everybody from the area, again, this is just a straw poll, right, of police kind of investigating. It's a small community, Coconut Grove. Granted, Miami's large, but Coconut Grove's fairly small, or at least was at the time. It was pretty close-knit. People said, well, I don't really remember there. I mean, I remember this Henry Johnson Blair guy who did actually kind of live in that area at the time, but I don't really remember a Hank. And the other part of that is, since he was the air marshal, he was actually assigned to South American routes, so he was spending a lot of time in South America at the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're little tiny things.
He might have known her. That doesn't necessarily mean that
he might have known her, and he might
kidnapped
have known her and said he was going to take her to South America, and that was the end of that relationship, because she was like, "Wow, you're actually crazy. You're 10 years older than me, and you're married." No, and she wrote about it in her journal, and that was that. And then she disappeared 6 weeks later, and whatever. I don't put a lot of stock into this, but it is interesting.
The timeline for him and his marriage, though, don't exactly line up.
It almost exactly does. He had just gotten married
right before she disappeared.
He just got married, and literally like days before she disappeared, returned from his honeymoon.
Well, no. The timeline there is iffy. It's either he returned 2 days before she disappeared, or he returned the day after she disappeared, depending on where you find the timeline.
Depending on if you believe him or his wife.
I mean, listen, I'm just saying that the timeline is not concrete.
Yeah, the way that I've seen it, and again, this could be totally wrong. The way that I've seen it is his reporting said, we got back from our honeymoon the day after. Mm-hmm. His wife's reporting, even though she seems to have stood by him during this entire time. He spent some time in jail, and he's out, and they're still together. But she said, no, we got back 2 days before she disappeared.
And I would say that she's probably the right one, because women usually keep closer track of that stuff than guys do.
True.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not, I don't know. He spent 2 years in jail for a lesser charge. He didn't get charged with the felony charges. He got charged with 2 counts of misdemeanor stalking, spent 2 years in jail, and then Sue sued him and won a $5 million settlement.
I wonder how much that she ever collected.
I was going to say, I doubt she saw much of that.
Yeah,
she died just a few years after that.
It's so weird to sue an individual for amounts of money that large, because there is no way they're ever going to be able to deliver.
Yeah,
I mean, I can
agreed, but
you've got this outstanding judgment against him, so anytime he makes any money, you lawyers step in and take it, but
Okay, so here's a question. So I know that debt is inheritable. Like, I run up a bucket load of credit card debt and have a passel of kids and then keel over, and that debt the credit card company can pass that on to the children.
No, they can't. I mean, they can take it out of your estate, I think.
They take it out of your estate. They don't.
They can't tag the kids with it.
Nope.
They can't?
Nope.
Okay,
No.
well, I know some debt is inheritable. And so my question is, would this kind of debt be inheritable?
It's inheritable in as much in that it can be taken out of your estate. So if your estate is worth $5 million and you're $2 million in debt, that comes
they can
out
get
of
the two, and that's it.
Yeah.
that comes out of their inheritance, right? But it's my understanding that unless you take over, like
A mortgage, maybe.
right? So
Yeah.
like if they
Yeah.
inherited the house, you inherit that debt because you suddenly become the owner of a house, so you are paying off the mortgage. But it's my understanding. I could be wrong.
I was talking to somebody recently, and they were utterly convincing me that, oh yeah, if I've got elderly family, and we were talking about debt, and they were saying, oh yeah, like if they wanted to, they could come after you with that
I
debt.
don't think so.
I don't think
Unless
that's
you're
possible.
somehow like a co-signer on their debt or something.
Well,
like
I
that.
think this is we were talking about if the debt had gone bad, as in, I stopped paying on it for a year and then I die. Can they then turn
I don't
that
think so.
collection thing around?
I
No,
think they
but,
could take it out of the estate, maybe.
I'm sure we've got a lot of listeners who
I'm
would
sure
love
we're going to get
Somebody will-
emails
yeah,
that are
somebody
going
let
to tell
us
us the
know.
answer.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So anyway, Sue, died a couple years after that settlement was handed down, but it felt like vindication, certainly. I, like I said, I don't necessarily think that Hank kidnapped her or Amy or anything like that,
I
but
think he was just a Looney Tune sort of, what are these guys? What do you call
There's
them?
words to
Parasites,
describe him that are not nice.
yeah, nothing
but-
I have to say about him is a nice thing. Next theory is a real quick one. 'Cause
Oh, the twinsies?
Yeah, the twinsies. So just so everybody knows, a few days after Amy disappeared, 16-year-old twins Charles and Larry Glasser claimed to have kidnapped her, and they wanted $30,000 for her, which was a lot of money back then.
Still is a bit of money right now, but yeah.
The police found out that they were lying, and then they were arrested for extortion. So
this
People do this on a regular basis.
It's not. That's
Try
why.
to take advantage of a situation.
And that's
Yeah.
another reason I'm thinking that old Henry there was probably not our perp. Same
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, Hank.
Because these cases always attract those kinds of people too.
He was
police
Frank.
perverts.
he was not a good man, but I don't. Yeah. Anyway, our next theory is the outlaws / the pagans /
the
some
motorcycle
motorcycle gang of some kind.
Yeah, this is actually there was I'm a little older than you guys. I remember there was sort of a biker gang scare back in I
In the
guess late-
70s?
Yeah, there was. They were considered ultra scary.
They were, and also they were considered like untouchable by police a lot of times. So
Which I don't know why.
I don't know why either, but
yeah.
there's a book about this that Sue co-authored before she passed away. If this is your pet case and you know a lot about this theory, or you read the book, or you're really interested in it, go read the book. We officially do not have any time to talk about this
To talk
theory.
about
The full breadth of that book.
But we're
She
gonna.
went into great detail about her adventures because she spent
She did.
decades looking
Yeah.
for her daughter.
She really did. And so we'll talk a little, we'll do like a really high level overview of this theory. But if it strikes you as an interesting one, feel free to like do more research on it.
So, Devin,
Anyway.
this theory sounds very familiar. Are you going to explain to people why, in a panic, this theory made you think that you knew this story already?
No.
Please do.
No.
Please share it.
She used to be a biker
You
girl.
can't get out of it now.
No, this is very similar because we've done another story that's a lot like this one. That wasn't
did.
this one, but we did it last time.
Devin sent me a panicked message. Oh my God, have we done this story?
I did. It was like 2 days ago, too. I was like, it's too late to change. Oh, my God.
There are times when I'll be reading one of these things and I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to do this story. I said, wait a second, did we do that a year or two ago? Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Yeah, we've
they
been
do
doing
start
it
to
for long enough where it's kind of like,
You just want to make sure.
Listen,
Yeah.
that list for the listeners out on the website is also for us.
It is. Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
So, one of the other things that happened in Coconut Grove on March 5th, 1974, was a massive amount of bikers traveling through on their annual Bike Week tour. This tour took them from Coconut Grove, through Coconut Grove, up Main Highway, then onto the Florida Turnpike, and then up north, and then
And Main Highway was the
all the
route
way
that
across
she took to
the
her
country.
dad's work, right?
Main Highway is the route that Amy was walking along to her father's work, and the Florida Turnpike is where her camera was found a few days later.
Right.
So that's
270 some
that's
miles
one of
north.
Yeah. Sue got a tip 12 days after Amy's disappearance that somebody from the Outlaws biker gang had kidnapped her. She was able to arrange a meeting through a friend who had done some legal work for them, and it ended up being with two men, and with Amy and with and with Sue and with Ned.
So for people who don't know, because I know we went into detail in the Lauren Spear episode, but Outlaw Biker Gang is technically classified as what is referred to as the 1% of bikers, the ones who are truly the outlaws and the lawbreakers who do not care and do what they want. They're not law-abiding citizens who also happen to own a motorcycle.
Yeah. They're the ones that proudly proclaim that they are part of the 1%
and they will do whatever.
Really gnarly bike gangs.
Yeah, and they will do whatever they want.
They will.
The police shoot them.
Yeah.
They're like Cartman. I do what I want.
Anyway, this meeting happened with Sue's friend and then Ned, Sue's husband, Amy's father. And 2 members of the outlaw gang and Sue as well. And the men claimed to have not seen Amy personally, but they did confirm that other gang members had frequently kidnapped and sold young women in the past, which they called old ladies.
You get that, right?
Yeah.
Am I the only one that gets that?
No, I get it. It's just like...
Okay.
Anyway, they often were sold or exchanged for like a credit card or even like a bike. One woman came forward and said that she had been an old lady for the Outlaws for a while, and she was one time traded for a pair of chaps, leather chaps.
That's got to be good for your self-esteem.
In according to the stories in that culture, it's women were property. Much like you would see hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, where you traded them for stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not saying that's right, but that's what this is saying.
And so these 2 men said they would ask other members about Amy. They never really were able to provide any kind of concrete information.
Yeah, there was a lot of context that Sue had like this. Everybody's saying, "Yeah, I think I heard something about it. I'll get back to you," and then stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what I want to know, and obviously you can't answer it. Nobody really can. Is this tip that about that Sue got that somebody from the Outlaws had kidnapped her? Was this a hard tip, or was this just somebody who speculated and was thinking, "Hey, the bikers are going through town that day. I bet you don't know how solid this tip really is."
Well, it may have been solid because Sue did follow up a little bit here. In 1985, so 11 years later, a member of the Outlaws named Paul Branch called Sue and said that he had been in quote-unquote possession.
You mean the pagans?
He was Outlaws.
I was going to ask here, because I've seen
pagans and outlaws, and I frankly, no offense to all of you 1%er.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, because I couldn't.
God, they're going to come
really
and kill me.
Straight. Well, hey,
now those guys are all pretty old.
This file is
now.
geotagged to Joe's house.
True.
So we're safe.
It's true. No, I pretty much just assume it was the Outlaws because most of the reporting I've seen is the Outlaws. Okay. But I think it's just kind of like Bike Week. It sounds like is just like all of the 1%er bike gangs are going through together, or at least the ones that get along, and so it's kind of amorphous on who actually it was. But I'm gonna just keep saying they were the Outlaws. So Paul Branch,
as a general brand.
Paul Branch, I think, was a member for sure of the Outlaws. He called Sue or otherwise contacted her and said that he had been quote unquote in possession of Amy in Orlando for a while. He said that he bought her off of someone and that he had treated her well, but that when he bought her,
she'd been kind of rough around the edges.
She'd been roughed up a bit, beat up a bit. In general, claims like this would be brushed off, but he was apparently able to identify that scar that we talked about a little earlier on Amy's abdomen from the appendectomy. And again, this was way before anybody would have known that, really.
My only questioning of that is that if she says, well, can you identify any special marks on her body? What I would say, if I were asked that question and I was just full of BS, I would say, well, she had an appendectomy scar.
Yeah,
because that's a good chance she does.
So this is actually also the guy, you might have read this in the reading. I didn't write down the number, but Sue was offering a fairly sizable reward.
Oh yeah.
Basically the buying power of like $5,000. And when Paul Branch contacted Sue, he said, "I don't want the money.
Yeah.
I just want you to know what I think I know."
Yeah.
So I do lend a little credence. Again, I don't really know. I think appendectomy scars aren't I mean, they're not so uncommon, especially in those days.
They're very common.
They're pretty common, so it's totally possible that it was a different girl